What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of the Milwaukee Sports Performance Podcast. I'm joined today by one of our team members at Kinetic Sports Medicine, Dr. Jeff Stuke, and then Adam Morrow, the founder, current leader of the FlexProGrip, which is a new grip training device for baseball players that we have been using now for, and probably coming up on a year for performance rehab, injury prevention, kind of maintenance type things. So we want to have Adam come on. Jeff's been on the FlexProGrip podcast previously, and we wanted him to come on and give some background on the device and how it's being used and try to help people learn from it. So thank you guys for taking some time to come on today.
Thank you so much for having me. I don't know if I stole the thunder from Jeff there, if he was supposed to speak first, but it's wonderful to be here with you guys. And yes, you did say you guys have probably had FlexProGrip for about a year. It's been wonderful to work with you guys thus far. I really enjoyed the collaboration, and we feel we created FlexProGrip to an extent for people like you that are trying to make more informed decisions every single step of the way to truly help the athlete, not just address an injury.
Yeah, I agree. It fit right into our overall model when we started looking at it. Not gonna lie, I think I looked at it when you guys first came out, started going around. Honestly, it's pretty skeptical. Just the thing looks like Darth Vader's hand. And I'm like, this isn't real. And when Jeff joined us, started diving into the baseball stuff. He's like, hey, one of my former teammates created this thing. He told me about it. And I'm like, that's a real thing. That's something we should look at. And Jeff ran with it from there. Jeff, what got you interested in FlexProGrip? And now that I guess we've been using it for 11 months, apparently, what are some big takeaways that you've had in terms of how it has affected your practice?
I think initially, especially with how we operate as a clinic, we're very big into the objective data, right? We use a lot of dynamometry to inform our decisions in terms of return to play, how we progress patients, things along those lines. And this was a device that did that specifically. And it broke it down more in depth than other dynamometry, specifically handheld dynamometry would. Because you're able to look at individual fingers, all four fingers together, and even look at ulnar radial deviation within the device. So it kind of encompasses what we stand for in terms of using objective data to make informed decisions.
I think that's great. Let's maybe step away from the device for just a second and just look big picture baseball wise. I've recorded, I don't know how many podcasts about this, how many blogs. Overall, as a baseball collective group, we're not doing great on reducing arm injuries. It would be the trend that I see. I don't know if either of you guys want to disagree with me, but maybe just give me some perspective of what you two are seeing in the baseball world in regards to arm injuries, specifically around the elbow, and the overview and background that maybe led to wanting to create a different solution.
Yeah, I'm happy to get started on this, but for us in really wanting to get started on, I guess, the solution, the revolution with this problem is there were a few things that were pretty obvious. One, we as a baseball industry didn't have anything that was actually concrete. If we did, we wouldn't be seeing 35% of the pitchers at an MLB level with a UCL injury. So when we came on the scene, for instance, when we started talking and it was what makes FlexProGrip different, Michael, you stated this perfectly when you talked about FlexProGrip on a previous podcast. Like what makes it different? One, stripping the thumb out. Two, training at the long muscle length of the fingers. We can get into the specifics of that later on, but those two things are huge. So we wanted to look at how the musculature is actually having to work during a throw and address that specifically. Now, going back to baseball as a whole, beyond just what we do with FlexProGrip, this problem has been addressed, quote unquote, by the industry through mechanics and through workload management. I am not going to say those things are bad, but what those things do is try to eliminate risk or try to decrease the exposure to risk. The problem is we as athletes cannot work that calculated when we're trying to be as good as we can be every time we step on the mound or grab a ball. We are going full go to get the person out in front of us at all times. throw the hardest pitch we can, throw the nastiest break we can, whatever it is that is ultimately going to get the W at the end of the day. So trying to operate in this space where we're going to move, quote unquote, as efficiently as possible, not just what feels good from a movement perspective, but what some biomechanical assessment tells us we should be doing. To me, that's a non-starter because of all the factors that go with it. One, personal movement biases, what makes somebody good, all the things associated with that. And then, of course, the never-ending cycle of if we move better, that then enables us to throw harder. So then we're right back to square one of trying to figure out how to move better, which is then going to, in turn, allow us to throw harder. Again, non-starter as far as I'm concerned. Then the other side of that, workload management. That's awesome. But then you're telling me the second times or the second somebody throws one pitch too many during a week or accidentally spikes a workload because they're having the best pen of their life and they just keep going, that we're going to spike injury risk. I don't love that. So why wouldn't we take the approach of enabling the body to handle more risk as opposed to decrease the total exposure? I just don't take too kindly to a bubble boy type approach in sports performance. I would rather take the Iron Man approach or the Superman approach. Just treat the athlete as an athlete, train them how we would doing anything else, expose them to forces, get them strong, and actually address the problem. So yes, the summary to your initial question of what's going on with all these injuries, to me, it's we've tried to avoid for so long, and avoiding just doesn't work when we can't avoid trying to win.
I agree. Jeff, what are things that you see, and specifically maybe some issues that you encountered in the injury world that kept us searching for better solutions?
Yeah, I mean, I think this conversation will always come back to the dreaded Tommy John, right? Guys blowing out their UCL and needing some rehab structure to get back to a return to throw phase and then eventually back on the mound. I think that's one of like the most forefront injuries that we deal with. But outside of that, I've also been seeing in recent months a lot more of like flexor pronator strains, even some UCL sprains, things of that degree that aren't as severe as like a full rupture of the UCL, but still require some significant rehab in the sense of need some time to shut down, need the tissue to be able to calm down so we can tolerate loading it back up in a structured manner. And that's kind of where using a device like the FlexPro can be really handy because it allows us to kind of get exposure in different positions similar to how we're going to throw. Because like Adam was saying, most of the training we do with this device is done in a straight fingered position, similar to how you're going to release a ball. That's where the most stress is on the elbow during the throw. And so that's where we want to train it. And yeah, I think primarily right now, I haven't been seeing as many post-surgical cases, a lot more conservative non-op management. All of them, again, come back to the musculature surrounding the elbow, the muscles we use to support and stabilize that UCL.
I want to give my 2 cents on 2 topics before we move on here and get your guys' reaction. I think something that I've been talking about a lot is, Adam, you referenced the percentage of MLB pitchers that are going through TJ. That honestly discounts the flexor pronator strains and other times missed because of elbow problems as well. But it continues to go up. And everyone said, everyone wants to pick one thing. It's fastball velocities. It's pitches spinning more. It's prioritizing strikeouts. It's not prioritizing pitchers that can throw for 7 innings and throw complete games. And again, I think all of those are potentially true, but it's the way the sport is. I think the one thing that no one is talking about to me is we are seeing, like Jeff is seeing, more and more kids that had their first elbow injury at 10. And then they had another long shutdown in high school. And then they had a Tommy John late in high school or something like that. We're seeing these pros that have been having off and on elbow pain for 10 plus years leading up to it. And I think that is something that on our level, like, yes, we do work with college, we do work with pros. Honestly, we see more high school kids. I think I'd love to get your reaction to that in general as well.
I think some of it's the nature of the beast. And if I'm not mistaken, Jeff and I actually might have talked about this when he appeared on the Layback podcast. So I guess shameless plug if anyone wants to hear Jeff dig deep on this specific topic. I forget which episode number that was, but definitely go check out Jeff on our end as we dug deep on. Now, what I would say, again, nature of the beast is so much pressure to get a scholarship, so much pressure to showcase. These athletes are having to perform at their highest potential at younger ages than ever before. Now, there's good and bad with that because it means you can get seen if you are not in one of the big clubs that Jeff played for, that I played for coming up. I mean, shoot, Jeff, I know you were a GRB guy, which is now like the club in the Midwest. I played for a team called the Louisiana Knights, which at the time had literally two teams. It had an A team and a B team, and now literally spreads from Florida to California and has every age group from T-ball to high school. So I don't understand how this stuff has grown to the capacity that it has, but I also understand the reasoning for it. One, people are willing to pay. Two, colleges and pro teams have shown that the way to be seen is to play in these events. And I hate that this is the reality that we're in. And I don't have a great response for you, Michael, as to like why, aside from this is the reality that we're in. This is the path that athletes think they have to follow. And until pro and college teams show otherwise, we're kind of stuck in this reality. But then it goes back to, I guess, supporting the importance of what you guys do or what we do or what any PT strength group does. We need to prepare athletes for the demands that the sport requires. And unfortunately, the demands that the sport requires now go well beyond what you can do with a little leather ball with red seams. Now it's what can you do with a little leather ball with red seams every single month of the year, every week of the year at max outputs every single time you pick it up. And that stinks, but all we can do is take this reactionary position of working as hard as we can to put the athletes in the best position possible.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's very well said.
Something that I have been kind of coming across recently with a handful of my athletes, just given the nature, like Adam was talking about, of how baseball has become this year-round sport, which is good, right? We need to hone in on some of our skills. We need to expose our body to the stresses that the sport is going to put on it. But what I think a lot of athletes undervalue is actually taking time to rest and recover. In today's society, athletes, they want to give their 100% day in and day out, which is great, especially when you're working with somebody. You want somebody who's motivated to get better, not just at their sport, but physically. But it's really hard to get them to kind of take a step back and say, hey, yeah, your arm is a little fatigued right now in this return to throwing plan. Let's take a deload week, right? Decrease some of the stress on the body, allow the arm to recover a little bit, and then we can just hit it harder in this next phase. And someone will look at you crazy because it's like, well, no, I need to go pedal to the metal on this. I need to get back. And it's like, we will get back, right? But there's no like timetable that's written in stone, especially when it comes to rehab. Some people might take a couple weeks longer, a month longer than others would. At the end of the day, though, we're going to try and get you back to that spot you need to be in. But if we're not taking into account the physical toll that rehab has on your body as well, I personally feel like I'm doing a disservice there. So, Adam, I don't know if you have any opinions on that matter.
Yeah, I actually have a couple. Two things. One is, I think, back to the athlete education piece, which you guys do a tremendous job with, but I would encourage anybody out there, going 100% all the time doesn't mean you need to empty the gas tank, because you can also put 100% effort into recovering. That's a very real thing. And Jeff, I think you stated that perfectly, but we need to have down days for a reason. or we need to have recovery days for a reason. So if that's soft tissue work, or it is literally just eating 3,500 calories and getting 11 hours of sleep, all of those things are going to help you be at your best the next time you need to be your best. I'm going to jump a little bit ahead in conversation, but along these lines, it's one of the reasons we try to preach on our side workload consolidation. I'm guessing this pairs well with what you guys do as well, but taking a workload consolidation approach is going to enable you to put 100% effort into going balls to the wall when you need to perform, and then being able to step back and recognize you are doing every single thing in your power to be the best you can be the next time you need to throw a ball at 100% or run at 100% or do anything in sport at 100%. So for instance, when we program, when we do things like that, we want to stack high intensity work close together. That way you have this huge window to be back at 100% when it is actually demanded.
No, our philosophies line up very well with that, because that's the approach that we take. And to kind of continue along with this conversation, I think, and this came to mind while you were talking, Adam, when I coach recovery to athletes and like the idea of like taking care of yourself, I equate it to a bank account, right? Every time you're going out and throwing, hitting, lifting, you're taking withdrawals from that bank account, right? But then when you're taking care of your body in terms of recovery, tissue work, things like that, that's when you're putting deposits in, right? And we're always trying to make sure that that bank account is staying in the positive and it's never dipping below. If it does dip below, right, there's things we can do to try and get it back up into the black, but we want to try and manage that as best as we can, and we can't do that without recovery.
I think that's really good, and something that we preach, and something that attracted us to this device. So let's shift gears into talking a little bit. The entrepreneur side of me that runs a service business is fascinated by the whole story of actually developing this product, but we'll save that for another day. Basically, if people are not familiar, I'll include a link to the FlexPro website, but it is a relatively new device. Adam was saying, it uses string gauges, and it's going to allow us to work with pitchers, excluding the thumb, and using the fingers in long finger positions to more specifically target the muscles in positions that they're being utilized in throwing a baseball. I'm not going to lie, this idea, when I jumped on the call with you for the first time, was screamingly obvious to me, that I was a little pissed at myself that I had never thought about it before. Because baseball players don't involve the thumb. We've always done grip in like this closed fist position. And anecdotally, I've always believed that the forearm musculature is important for stabilizing the elbow and adding more active stabilization across that UCL. Just like we know the quads are important in ACL rehab, and the hamstring and quad ratios are important, and all of these things. The dirty little secret was always that we never saw much in the research about the effect of grip strength on injury risk or performance in baseball. And we buried that and just kept saying, we know we need to work grip. It's like, we just know it's there. So I guess briefly, how'd you come up with the idea? What was the start of getting the training protocols going, and how did you end up where you are now?
I'll try my best to exclude all the superfluous details to get to the nitty gritty and keep us on point. But ultimately, when my career came to an end, got into the training world, and just like anybody who runs a training facility, especially in the baseball market, people are going to come in wanting to throw harder, as well as with hurt elbows, and often some sort of mix. With that, we needed to learn as much as we could, as fast as we could. And what we quickly realized back in 2018 is nobody had a good solution for what was going on with the elbow. We were hearing things as asinine as pitchers aren't pronating at the right time, and that's why their elbows are blown. And to think that that was like a widely accepted approach was crazy to me, which then goes back to what I said earlier about the mechanics and avoiding risk. Like weird stuff. But what we needed to do was understand why UCLs tear. what we soon realized is nobody had any clue. So what you said, Michael, of like, oh my gosh, this is so obvious. How didn't I think of it? That's exactly how we felt after going through 2 years of research to figure out that the 3 best muscles to offload torque from the UCL are the FDS, the FDP, and the FCU. So I know I just threw initials at people, but I assume a lot of this is very much a trained podcast group of listeners. So that's the mid finger muscles being the FDS, the fingertip muscles being the FDP, and the ulnar deviation or the side to side waving muscle of the wrist being the FCU. How can those muscles do anything for the elbow? Well, they all originate around the UCL. 2 of them, the FDS and the FCU, originating on the medial epicondyle, lo and behold, the same point that the UCL originates. And then the FDP overlapping with that insertion back into the ulna. So originating right at the base of the UCL or the insertion point of the UCL and then running down to the fingertips. That had been documented for years by surgeons. And for whatever reason, the dots were never connected. But anytime you read a surgical report, you can see FDS elevated, FDS moved, avoided FDP origination point. So for us, we kind of think it needed an outsider to come in and be like, wait, there's something to this. Because everybody was just so entrenched with what was going on, their blinders were on. So we were able to approach this of why are UCLs tearing? And then once we figured out why UCLs were tearing, we finally got to the point of, well, we should probably do something about this because nobody else is. So for us, it was never about creating a device, but creating the device stemmed from realizing baseball as a whole didn't have a solution. So it was defining a problem and then realizing that in defining a problem, there was no answer to this problem. Then from there, it led to talking to people in your shoes, people way smarter than us, people with medical degrees, clinicians who understand loading, who understand physiology to create the necessary protocols to now not just assess the issue, but actually train it away. So then we got into all the nuanced principles of muscle tendon unit loading and understanding what percentages of a maximum voluntary contraction that we need to operate at, and loading principles, time under tension, all these different things that ultimately go into creating the best system possible for the soft tissue surrounding the UCL to actually do its job, as opposed to UCL having to be the front runner in offloading torque. That's just not a recipe for success.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that when we had our first call, it was one of the things that stood out to me. I'm always relatively skeptical of like new things. Don't want to be the last person to adopt something, but just in the 12, 13 years I've been a clinician, I've seen a lot of the next best things show up and not stick around. What really stood out to me was how much your protocols, the device, what you were trying to do was backed in science that we'd known about from other studies that, like you referenced, like well-regarded studied, published tendon research and things like that, things that we use in other injuries and have just never applied or tried around the elbow. So it just really clicked that it wasn't, to me, it wasn't like you were trying to sell or develop some brand new system or approach to taking care of the elbow. You were just creating a physical product and software that allowed us to use things that we were doing in other parts of the body around the elbow. So it fit in for us seamlessly. And I think one of my favorite courses that I've ever taken is from a guy named Eric Mira. And he calls his course Complex Understanding for Simple Solutions. And that's how I felt when I heard you and was looking at this device, because there's a lot of nuance and detail that went into the development of it for something that's actually relatively basic once you get started, and just really hit home with me.
100%. You see anything in our device that isn't done in the weight room. Like all the principles that we have and put on the back of the hand and have data being spat out on your phone or iPad or whatever, those are all things that people have been doing for years. And to us, it was just about taking simple principles and applying it to musculature that's just been undertrained, or untouched for whatever reason.
To add on to that
I
too,
agree.
like Adam was saying with the programming, yeah, we've been doing this for different body parts for a while. And I think as like a new user of the device and like programming it for my athletes, having those pre-programmed like training sessions and being able to follow our like previous understanding of loading help kind of seamlessly just progress in utilizing the device with the athletes. So I personally thought that was pretty helpful in terms of like ramping up the usage of it.
Jeff, maybe why don't let's put you on the spot here. You can share how we've been using it the last 11 months, some of the use cases, some of the benefits that we've seen from it. And then Adam can tell us everything that you've been doing wrong.
So when we initially rolled it out, we sought out some of our athletes who were healthy, right? At the time, there wasn't like a large inflow of guys who actually like needed total rehab of any sense. So we started initially in the non-operative or in a non-rehab space with it and just working on trying to avoid injury, right? Risk management in that sense. There are some benefits in terms of like, yes, your spin rate can improve, your command can improve. And so we initially started it with a small group of athletes. Part of that was to just understand how we would utilize it as a whole. And from there, we were able to grow it to the point where like every baseball player that comes in, we're going to test you. Your numbers are low. We're going to work on building up strength just to be able to stabilize that elbow. So initially it kind of started in that sense. Over the course of that year, we then started seeing guys that came in with flexor pronator strains, things that actually needed like a solid rehab plan. And we were able to like build out programs for them, follow the programs, continue testing them along the way. And we were able to see increases in the strength and get them to a point where we were able to start throwing again. And so now we do use it as a monitoring tool. So when we have guys come in for their monthly maintenance programs, we test them, right? See where their numbers are at. Your strength numbers are a little bit lower than they were last time. Great. Now we really got to hit some forearm strength. Let's try and get you in more frequently so we can continue training on it. And we use it as a tool to decide, like, do we think you're ready to take that next step in your rehab plan? Do I feel comfortable with you picking up a ball and starting to throw again? And so it has been useful in both like a non-rehab setting and as in the rehab setting.
So Michael, do you really want me to say where things are going really well as maybe areas of improvement? Because I'm happy to.
Yeah.
Yes. Give me feedback.
I'd love to get your feedback.
Yeah. Feedback live on the air. That's exactly how we want it. You guys have been terrible. No, you guys across the board have been doing extremely well. And I think the pat on the back areas to start is one, your ability to assess the fact that you guys are getting guys in monthly to figure out where they're at is tremendous, because you have a really good idea of where baselines are at that point. So you can analyze trends, which more than anything in the injury realm, that's vastly important. Rather than just like a one-time printout of where someone is, you can actually understand, are we going up? Are we going down? And if just like the market, I guess we're going back to a business discussion here. If you see a couple months down in a row, that's where a real problem exists. But if we're steady, if we're seeing some improvements, awesome, thumbs up. Now, another area that you guys are crushing it, Jeff, I know we went back and forth on this a lot during the spring, is preaching the recovery side. So even if a guy comes in and it's a weird day, it doesn't line up great with the throwing schedule, maybe we're not hitting a high intent day on the device and trying to fatigue the crap out of the forearm musculature that we need to be ready for this guy to throw the next day. We're focused on recovery. So going back to that conversation that we were having earlier is understanding not just like, oh, here's a nail, let's use the hammer. Understanding what the real problem is or what we can do at this time to best support the athlete. I think you guys have done a great job on that. Now, the thing where we can improve as a whole, like applying this system, I think also presents a little bit of the struggle of physical therapy in general. The fact that you don't see an athlete every single day, or heck, you might see them once a week or once every 4 weeks, as you guys said. So the reason I bring that up is one of the major components that we care about for reducing injury risk is building muscle tendon unit stiffness, or improving the mechanical properties of the muscle tendon unit. And Michael, I'm happy that all the research that we try to present resonated with you, because that I know you guys know that's super well researched by Keith Barr, by Kubo, by these tremendous tendon researchers, that ultimately stiffness is what is going to enable us to have a stronger, tougher, more resilient, more fatigue resistant muscle tendon unit, not just max force. Max force is awesome, but that's also kind of a measure of like one-time readiness as opposed to overall longevity, health kind of things. I don't want to speak as if I'm a clinician and screw up the wording here. I'll probably butcher it compared to what you guys can do. But I think maybe that is something that we as a whole can try to figure out. How can we develop a system where athletes can focus on that kind of long-term training approach, not just assessing trends, which we know matter, but how can we get to the point where we can put athletes in a position to go through sustained training, whether it's 2 times a week for 8 to 10 weeks, 8 to 12 weeks, where we can make legitimate, true improvements in muscle tendon unit stiffness, which then we can reduce elbow gapping like crazy. Like, I know you guys hopped on that webinar that we had with the Wake Forest crew. I mean, 10 weeks of training on FlexPro, training 2 to 3 days a week, saw a decrease in medial elbow joint gapping of 43%. So not only are we preventing that UCL from stretching, we're forcing that musculature to actually close that gap. And that's what's ultimately causing the injury at the elbow. So I bring that up not as like, guys, we're struggling here. This is just, how can we better the system? And maybe that's where we can put our heads together to figure out a way to make this better for athletes as a whole.
I think one of the things that we were excited about, and I have several thoughts around it. I mean, the first is you kind of referenced the craziness of the team sports schedule that we've been using this device now for 11 months. Obviously, there's a little startup curve with getting people in. This will be our first time of legitimately having an off season for some of our crew since we got started with it. We're really hoping that'll bring some opportunities. And the second piece is continuing to educate the families and the players on, there is a certain element that we can give you the tools, we can create the programs, we can give you the way to do it. At some point, you've got to do it, right? You can lead a horse to water. You can't make them drink once they get there. It's like, we can lay everything out. We can say, here's what we recommend. And at some point, you just have to prioritize getting in and doing those things. I'm excited to see how the off season goes here, as we just, for the most part, finished fall ball up here last weekend. A couple more showcases, but we'll have a true down period where some guys can get after it without worrying about throwing the next day. And I think that leads me into my probably last little section, and then we'll get you guys both out of here. I know times are busy, but I guess we could break this down into 2 different times a year. What would the ideal arm care schedule while you're ramped up with the grip training take? Because it isn't always more is better, because again, we know throwing with forearm fatigue is an injury risk factor. So like at some point you just can't keep trying harder. Like at some point you cannot just do more of this. So maybe how would you best structure the forearm strength component of an arm care routine? And then you mentioned a little bit, but just as we go into the off season where we're not concerned with throwing as much, or maybe early in a rehab program where we're not concerned with throwing as much, how would you structure the weeks from a grip training, forearm strength perspective?
I'm going to start on the super basic level with this answer, and then we can get more granular as we go. With anything for that matter, let alone forearm training, arm care, we start with what's most important. And if we're in a period where the goal is to get out and win a ball game, everything we should do, or everything we do off the field, should go into supporting how we get out and how we win a ball game. Then if we're in a period where that stuff doesn't matter, all of our energy should go into how can we be as good as we can be. So when it is time to do those things, we can actually do it. Now, let's get into the details of that answer, because I know that's just like fun words and might sound like a good answer on paper, but I didn't really offer any detail. So the detail of that, starting in the off season, as you said, Michael, throwing might not matter as much, which means we can put way more of our investments or our deposits, or I guess withdrawals, to stick with Jeff's analogy there. We can take out way more from our bank account for forearm dedicated training, because we don't need the forearm to be ready to throw 90 miles per hour 3 days a week at that point. We might just be going through kind of like a deload throwing period, or just like keeping the arm moving for the sake of keeping the arm moving, because throwing a baseball is fun. I'm not going to tell someone to stop throwing just because if they like it, they like it. Awesome, do it. But at that point, we can put way more energy into training. So if that means going 3 to 4 high intent training sessions per week targeted on that medial elbow, awesome, love it. Then in season, maybe we step away from that a little bit. And our goal is to focus on getting the outs, winning a baseball game. If we can execute 2 high intent training sessions per week, that's awesome. That's unbelievable. We're going to maintain. And if we can execute 2 sessions per week, hey, we might even make improvements. Now, if this sounds familiar to anyone, this is how I assume most people would recommend training just in general, total strength and performance training be programmed. When you are in an off season, you can probably get away with 4 to 6 high intent sessions per week. Break it up for body parts, or posterior, anterior, upper, lower, however you want to do your splits. That's not as much my lane right now, but you can break that up and you can put a ton of training economy towards those things. Then in season, the goal, again, be as good as you can be on the field. So your goal is to maintain in the weight room. So if that means you can get 2 to 3 total sessions per week, awesome. From our perspective, grip and forearm training really should be the exact same thing. Do as much as you can in the off season when we can afford to do it, to fatigue that area, knowing that it's going to better support us when it comes time to perform, when the lights are on. And then in season, we can step back and know that we put in the work, trust that we put in the work, and just do everything in our power to maintain that baseline.
Awesome. Jeff, do you have any thoughts going into really our first off season, things that you're excited to try that you've maybe had in your back pocket and haven't had the chance to roll out yet?
Yeah, first, I just want to say, I think Adam hit the nail on the head there with how he kind of laid out how the training should look throughout the entire year. I think what I'm excited most about in this off season is really just like, I've been using the device now in a training and rehab setting with a lot of guys over 11 months. So I've been able to kind of, I wouldn't say perfect my craft in terms of the programming side of things, but I think it'll be a good challenge for me in a sense of like, okay, I've built up this knowledge of how to use the device in a training setting. Now let me go and put it to use with some of our highest level athletes that we have. What I will also say is I think pretty much all pitchers in this area should be doing some type of forearm training, whether it be on the FlexPro or it be actually training your fingers in a long finger position. That's one thing that, like, throughout the use of this device, and I'll give a shout out to Terry Phillips. I know, Adam, you're working with him. Saw like a while ago, he started doing training in that position. And there was another one of those, like, why haven't I thought of that? So, like, the principles that we have learned from the FlexPro, we've been able to take and adapt to training without the FlexPro. So I think it's been useful, because then guys that are too far away to make it in 2 times a week, I can say, hey, here's some great finger training that we can do. You can do it at home. It can become part of your arm care. So I think that's been a very valuable insight that I've also gained throughout the whole process.
For sure. It's just a really good message that, to me, and we see this every year, this time of year, fall ball's done. Everyone's shifting gears into the off season. My elbow's sore, I'm just going to rest. My back's sore, I'm just going to take a couple of weeks off, whatever the case may be. It's know that the path to a healthy year next year starts with what you do right now. And if you dig yourself a hole, if you don't take advantage of the opportunity, the downtime, you're just putting yourself behind the 8-ball there. So I think those are really good points for people overall. I know you guys are busy, and I don't want to take up too much more of your time. So Adam, thank you very much for coming on. And Jeff, thanks for sharing your insights. Adam, where can people learn more about the FlexPro or find you guys online?
Hopefully this is pretty simple. FlexProGrip.com if you want to go to our website, and then our social medias, which are Instagram and formerly known as Twitter or X, is at FlexProGrip, both of them. And then if you want to reach out to us directly, info@FlexProGrip.com is the email. So hopefully that covers it. But yeah, thank you so much for having me on and let me talk a little bit about what we do and then how we integrate even with Kinetic, because working with you guys has been incredible.
Yeah, no, last you guys have been awesome in terms of helping us with some of the programming, sending you some throwing schedules and getting some feedback based off testing, how we can better see improvements in some of our players. We've been really enjoying the partnership and collaboration and look forward to continuing it. And I'll use that as a shameless plug. If you are a baseball player that is listening to this, we do the FlexProGrip training. They have normative data sets for players of all ages, ability levels, velocity levels. Let us assess where you stack up against your peers, or where you stack up versus your velocity goals, even from a elbow health standpoint. Now would be the time, as Adam has hit, to come in and get that test done so you can see where you are at. We also have programs that you are able to come in and use their device in our clinic. So I would really encourage anyone that's listening to this to don't wait till November, December when you find out your elbow is still sore. Let's take advantage of it. Let's see what's going on, and let's build a plan so that you can have a great 2026 season and not carry the same deficits and injuries into that. If you are at all interested in that, contact information will be in the show notes as well. You can schedule a call directly with me, and I can get you set up with Dr. Jeff to get an assessment and a program built out for you. Thank you guys a lot. Enjoy the nice fall weather while it still lasts. And thank you everyone for listening. We'll see you on the next episode.